looking over credit applications and people's finances, people are not all doing as well as they might present themselves to be. And I think that's true. So I think that while there will be a lot of people that want to buy, I think some people are really hurting over the last few years. I mean, inflation has affected a lot of people's bottom lines and a lot of people's budgets and financing. So while I do think that there are a lot more clients that are going to be qualifying, I think that there will be some people who just say, screw it, I want to sell my house and clear out all my debt. Like I want to pay off my car and credit cards and this, or maybe they just do a refinance to do some of that. But I think that there's going to be a lot more people that qualify on paper. In terms of how many of them actually do choose to buy, it'll be curious to see, but I'd say 3 to 5% appreciation year over year. I think your rate target is accurate. I thought we were going to get this summer into the low 6s. I now would say if they do the rate cuts as they've been projected, I think this summer or fall we'll probably see mid 5s.
Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast. This is our first episode of 2024, and Kate and I had a thought of what better way to start it than to maybe talk about some predictions about 2024, specifically more on the lending side. I think that's the biggest question of the year is what will happen to interest rates. So we brought on one of our favorite friends, David Keller.
Cheers, boys. I know you're not supposed to technically cheers with water, but the first podcast of 2024.
Kill it. Cheers. So, David, we haven't had you on in a little bit. How's things going?
I think it was August. Is that right?
That sounds about right.
August, yeah. Things are good. Yeah, end of the year. It was funny because I listened to that podcast just yesterday in preparation for today. And it was interesting hearing the conversation we were having about kind of the movement of the market up until that point, how we felt things were going and how we projected things to the end of the year. I feel like the end of the year, the last few months really shaped up very similarly to what we expected it to be in August. What do you guys think?
Can you remind us what the prediction was?
Yeah. I mean, so I remember we were talking about how business had picked up because I felt like business had picked up for all of us through that point. I think end of May, like June, July, August were really, really pretty consistent. That continued through October, November, and then December, it slowed some, but it wasn't anything like 2022. So I felt such a different slowdown in like October to the end of the year, or even January of 22. It felt a lot less like there was a pause or a halt in the industry. And in fact, I felt like even people got more excited as we got closer to the end of the year because there was all that news about the Federal Reserve and meetings and possible rate cuts. So I had clients I was meeting right in between Christmas and New Year's, getting them pre-qualified on like a Wednesday. So I definitely feel a different temperature in the air for the market, heading into this new year than I felt last year. Yeah. And I feel like that kind of aligns with what we were expecting.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, especially because traditionally during the holidays, where even if we are double down and staying focused and pushing and grinding, just traditionally the market's typically a little bit slower, right? But you just mentioned, dude, you're slinging and gunning pre-approvals on a Wednesday between Christmas and New Year's. Do you feel like with some of the news that came out about rates and rate cuts and just, predictions from everybody through what 2024 will look like, do you feel like part of that urgency is back on the buyer side?
I think it's getting there. And so I feel like a lot of realtors, it's kind of perfect because leading up to this podcast, which I didn't expect I'd be back so soon. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
But I remember, and even in their last podcast, you're like, well, if the market changes, we'll probably have you back on again. And I was like, oh, makes sense. But a lot of realtors have been asking the same thing because maybe they have listings or maybe they're just looking at their business and they're like, what are you seeing? Are you seeing more clients coming to get pre-approved? Do they seem more urgent? Do they seem, I feel like the people who are getting qualified right now, at least from what I'm seeing, and obviously it's anecdotal and just what I'm seeing in front of myself, but they seem motivated. They seem to realize that there is an opportunity to purchase and that it is likely to get more competitive moving forward.
Yeah.
A lot of the people out there that have been trying to push, values are going to drop by this huge percentage or wait till the crash to buy. I think people are starting to not, that have sat on the sidelines, not really still hold those same beliefs.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to purchase. I don't feel like it's been a night and day difference. I don't feel like it's been, oh my gosh, now everybody wants to buy and they're all in a hurry. But that's kind of encouraging to me, honestly, because I would much rather prefer, I'm sure you guys as well, some kind of healthy balance between buyers and sellers, where homes that don't have as much attention, maybe they're going to lower the price or, give some incentives to a buyer. Homes that do have a lot of attention still should deserve to maybe get bid up a little bit, or for the seller to make a little bit more money. It's not, if they have a desirable home, they should be allowed to market it fairly and get a fair price. So it seems like we're getting to some kind of a normalcy within the last couple of months, within the last month, I'd say especially. But we'll see if rates do continue to come down. I'm curious to see how everything's going to be affected. How much more inventory we're going to get on the market, how many clients decide to be move-up buyers. I think that's what's been missing from the market.
Yes.
Do you guys agree?
100%.
Yes. I've had 0 move-up buyers.
Yeah. I think that a lot of them really have sat out for the last 12 to 18 months. And I get it, because if you bought a house, let's say around $400,000 within the last few years, and your rate is in the 3 to 4% range, looking to get a move-up house, not only have homes appreciated in the last few years,
6-ish.
Yeah, your step-up home that would have maybe been $500,000, when you purchased your house 3-4 years ago, it's probably now closer to $600,000. And then on top of that, the rate is going to be at least 2 to 3% higher than when you purchased. So that math just doesn't check
It
out.
almost doubles your mortgage.
You're going to be going up possibly double, but maybe 50%, 30, 40, 50%. And some people's budgets can handle a hit like that. Some people are living well below their means in terms of their, disposable income or how they're investing or saving. So there are clients out there that doesn't really matter for their payment to go up by 30, 40%. That's few and far between, though. Most people are not in that place. So I feel like a lot of my clients have been first-time home buyers, which is great. That's normally what I focus on, that are just trying to get into the market and get a starter home of some kind. And then I have had some clients who have needed to buy, right? Whether it be a death or, divorce or a marriage or kids come into the picture or a job, or it's that dream home. There's been a couple clients looking, but it's very few step-up buyers or move-up buyers.
I want to be kind of cautious of my predictions, but I have a couple scenarios, one that I'm hoping for and one that I think is more likely. Mm-hmm. I think you touched on it already. I'm hoping in an ideal world, interest rates come down just enough to the point where we see consistent and stable growth over the next 5 years. Something in that ballpark, I think 5 to 7% growth annualized. Mm-hmm. I think even that's on the higher end of what stable growth is. I think they
3
say
to 5 is pretty consistently stable.
So I would like to see something more like that, because even though I've done well for myself, I look at the step up as being impossible right now. Yeah. And I'd like to give myself a few years of saving and working and increasing my income where houses aren't just going skyrocketing up. I think more realistically what's going to happen is interest rates are going to come down. And because, now I feel like you look at it, you had buyers starting March of 2020, all the way through now January of 2024, who haven't bought a house because at one point, I can't buy because it's too competitive. And then, I can't buy because the rates are too high. And I think if rates come down to a more nominal number, like 5%, 6%, I have a strong feeling a lot of buyers are going to come into the market because they've been holding out for 4 years.
Yeah.
And they're going to have that FOMO that everybody else just bought and I want to buy. And I think a part of me believes that it's going to drastically increase the value of homes because there's going to be, 10 to 15 buyers per house on the market if step-up buyers don't come into the listing marketplace with their, first home at a big level. Because we just don't have enough inventory.
One, I think it also depends on people's fundamental belief about real estate moving forward, right? If you own a home currently, let's say it was a starter home that you've owned for 3 to 5 years, are you going to look at the market and what values of homes have done in the last 3 to 5 years? And this is a conversation I have with a lot of my clients where they're going,
Let's just rent it.
I think I might just convert this to a rental property
Yeah.
or do a home equity line of credit and, pull out a little equity to buy my next home and then have the tenant I'm going to rent this house out to pay off this mortgage and my HELOC that I took out to buy my next house. And they look at how homes have appreciated. It'd be similar, I think, to someone having stock in a particular company, maybe Tesla or Bitcoin or whatever. And if you see how it's performed over the last 3-4 years, there's few asset classes or investment opportunities that have performed as strongly as homes have in the last 5 to 10 years.
And there's not very many assets that a lot of families have access to.
No, yeah, 100%. Well, and I'm curious too, because you mentioned a group of people, the people who have bought within the last 12 to 18 months, right? And I was just talking to some clients of ours the other day, and I'm curious what your thoughts are for people who maybe did buy when, quote unquote, the rates were too high, right? Where we were in high 6s, low 7s. That was kind of like the worst of the worst, I feel like, when we were touching into that 7% mark. Do you anticipate sometime this year for somebody who may be locked in at that peak of interest rates, high 6s, low 7s, to be able to
Maybe even
refinance?
8s. Yeah, some people even up in the 8s.
Even up in the 8s.
7s, 8.
Do you anticipate at some point this year those people being able to refinance out of that rate?
Yeah, 100%. I think that what's a little bit different, the last refinance boom we really had was like in 2020, 2021, even some into 22, but it was really 2020 and 21 where it was just rates dropped nearly overnight from the mid 4s to like the low 3s, and it was bouncing back and forth throughout the beginning stages of COVID. But obviously the federal government was taking very drastic policies, putting policies into place that were causing a total upheaval and just shift in the market, right? It changed everything. So not only was everybody trying to buy a house then, but nearly everybody was trying to refinance if they had a mortgage because it was like a
Lenders
no-brainer.
were like dying, overworked, dying.
Yeah. It was very stressful. It was definitely, I think it led to a lot of burnout and a lot of stress. It was great. And it's funny because I listened back to the podcast yesterday and I was like, oh yeah, I was recalling the fact that while it was financially like one of the better years for me, I was so burnt out and so just exhausted. So I don't think that they're going to steer us so low so quick this time. I hope, I think that they overcorrected low, then they had to overcorrect high, which is what we've been feeling for the last year and a half. And hopefully they find some kind of middle ground to where I don't know how you really control it because I think I was looking at something yesterday that was talking about how many more buyers will come into the market as rates continue to drop. And essentially it's not an exact number, but it's roughly about 5 million more buyers qualify for every 1% of interest rate drops. So if you think about from 7.5% to 8%, which is close to where we were 2 months ago, it's already dropped about 1% from there. And so that's 5 million more buyers. If it drops into the high 5s, that's another 5 million. If it drops into the low 5s, that's another 3 to 4. Like we're going to get an additional 10 to 14 million buyers probably that will qualify. And that's not to say 100% of like you could have 5 qualified buyers. It doesn't mean they're all going to buy, right? Maybe 1 or 2 of them buy within any given year. But even at 10 million or 14 million, if same numbers, 20, 30% of those people buy, that's several million more buyers. And I mean, you guys know better than I do, but an average number of transactions, real estate transactions in a year in the United States, what's an average number? Is it like around 5 million?
I don't know. I can quick Google search.
Yeah, Google that. I think it's around 5 million or so. So, I mean, if you're adding 10 to 20% more, that's a lot.
Average U.S. market.
Yeah, I guess real estate transactions.
I'm going to clarify it with homes.
Yeah.
It says from 1968 to 2023, the U.S. has averaged approximately 4,000 transactions annually. That can't be right. So that must be 3.82 million, up to 3.79 million.
Down to? I think it's more than that. I could search
The
it
stats here are not super helpful. I would be interested to know.
I'm gonna look and see. Well, I guess we can look.
We can look
figure it out
another
later.
day, and
Yeah.
anybody on the pod listening should maybe look that up. You know, what you were saying about it's hard to like know where the rate should end up.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big part of that is social media. The same way that when the rates went up, all of the gurus, whether they had any experience or not, Cade would send them to me. Peter would send them to me. It was always like the rate's gonna or the prices are gonna crash. Everything's gonna crash. I had guys that own hundreds of millions of dollars worth of commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Their market was crashing. They were sending me stuff knowing I'm a home flipper, and they're like, "Stop buying. Things are gonna crash. Buy everything deep discount." And thank God I didn't listen. I went off of what I could see, which was our market in Fresno wasn't changing like that. I'm curious to see if the same gurus, when the rates start dropping, start going out and saying, you know, home prices are going to spike 40%. Buy now, buy now. And then the Fed is going to lower the interest rate even to a nominal lower, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it's only 6.75 or something like that. And then more than 5 million buyers come out and home prices go up and the Fed says, oops, and raises the rate back up. I have a feeling that's going to be what ends up happening is some level of like kind of a bouncing back and forth.
Yeah.
I think it is likely to. I view the economy as a gigantic ship, and I think that the Federal Reserve made a really big turn to a lower rate at the beginning of 2020, and then they had to make an equally, if not great, actually a greater, it's a
Overcorrect.
greater correction, honestly, if you think about it, because they went from around mid fours to like low threes or high twos, which is only 1.5% or so. And then they went from 3% to 8%. So I mean,
1 year.
their swerve back up was so drastic.
Yeah.
So I do think it probably will be a little bit of a ping-pongy kind of experience moving down. So yeah, long story short, to answer your question about refinances, which I think is what the first question
Yes,
you
that was.
had, I'm going to be probably making a video and sharing it with my past clients and like sending it out just for an update. But from what signs seem to be pointing and what the Federal Reserve is kind of hinting and sharing, it's not all laid out, you know, exactly when things are going to happen, but the market is betting on when certain rate cuts or things are going to occur. I think a lot of that has been baked in to the rates already. I think that the rates, we've already seen them come down over 1% from the peak that they were at in like November. So I think a lot of these rate cuts have already been kind of built in and priced into the market as it is. I could see rates coming down this year, maybe a little bit more, maybe another 0.5% to 1%, which, you know, obviously would bring more buyers in and give a nice savings to people who probably have financed within the last 12 to 18 months. I haven't been encouraging a lot of my clients to start the refinance process just yet. I've been telling a lot of them that I would probably say March, you know, March or so is a good time to start having that conversation. February, March, you know, talking with your lending professional, maybe the one that already helped you with your loan, would be,
Or David Keller.
or me, you know, I'm happy to help.
absolutely.
Yeah, happy to help. But I think talking with a mortgage lending professional around that time would be really smart because, you know, a little bit about the process. You have 90 days from when your credit is pulled to really get into a transaction for a loan, whether that be purchasing or a refinance. And then beyond that, you have another 30 days to close, right? So if you start in March, you're going to have all the way through June to have, you know, looking at the market, paying attention to rates, where values are going, all that kind of stuff. And then you can have a more likelihood of catching rates at a what I think will be a better savings to you. Whereas if you refinance, let's say right now, let's say you're maybe around a 7.5 and you refinance to a 6.5 or a
Not a
6.75.
huge difference.
It's not a huge savings for most loans. Every 1/8% is around $25, $30 a month. So you think there's 0.8%, right? So if you drop from 7.5 to 6.5, 8 times 30 is what, $240. So you're going to save some, but I don't think you should try to necessarily catch it totally at the bottom. But if they're telegraphing a little bit that rate cuts are likely to happen this year, I think that it would make sense to not try to do it too soon because there are costs that get incurred when you do a refinance, and it depends from lender to lender, but you're usually looking at $2,000 to $4,000 in terms of all of the different costs, the title and escrow, doing the appraisal if it's needed. There are different things that are going to be a cost to you, whether you paid out of pocket or it's financed into the loan. Those are two different things. But there's likely going to be costs that are encountered and incurred when you do a refinance.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want someone to refinance 2 times. And,
Yeah.
I get it. If people really want to try to catch it now and do a refinance sooner than later, I think some people will.
Yeah.
But I think it's very likely that it'll be March to like September is when we see much more of a refinance,
Yeah. I want to hear who you guys think are the big winners with this big market shift. I'll share who I think. I think the big winners from the interest rates going way, way, way up were the people who bought in the winter and early months of 2022 and early 2023.
That's exactly
I think they got homes at a cheaper price with better discounts and better credits with a slightly lower rate. And I think those people made the best decision versus people who bought, like myself, right when the rates started going up, when it was still wildly competitive, but rates were increasing and it hadn't slowed down at all. Or the people who right now are starting to jump into the market, realizing that they're jumping in when everybody else is jumping in.
Yeah, I feel similarly to you. I purchased the home that I'm in now. I got qualified in the spring of 22 as rates were starting to move up. Yep, we were looking at a very similar time. I ended up purchasing a home in a neighborhood in an area that I'm very happy with. So at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, very happy with where I live. The home is great. But same thing, in relationship to people that had waited maybe a few months after me, my payment may be lower because I have a lower interest rate. But in terms of like dollars out of my bank account, I had to pay an appraisal gap. I had to be aggressive to get my offer accepted. And part of me goes, shucks, but I also have a beautiful home. I have great memories. I mean, we've had discussions about this, right? I love the memories I have there. I love the fact that it's tied to a lot of things in even my relationship with my fiance. We got engaged at that home. Like our wedding is going to be at the home. So yeah, I overpaid, in relationship to maybe other offers on other homes. But for that home, the only offer that was going to be accepted was what I gave, and I would do it again.
So do we all agree that we think the people who made, I'm not going to say the best because it was the best, but maybe the luckiest purchase?
It was a very fortunate time. I think their timing was very, very fortunate. But you could say that for anybody that bought before 2020.
Or refinance in 2020,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
If you bought
within this last
within the last
cycle, that
the
period
best
from
deals
November
were had
to January.
The best deals were had November to January of
22.
November 22 to January of 23. Absolutely.
Because we had the same clients I was talking about who were asking me about refinancing and stuff. They closed in January, like right at the beginning of January of that year. Got the purchase price. Off the purchase price was 10 or 15 grand plus another $7,000 credit. Yes, their rate's a little bit higher, but then now this year, come February, March, as they stay in touch with you and see what kind of goes on, they're primed for that refinance going in later this year.
So looking forward, when do we three think the best time to buy is? Because my answer is always when it's right for you.
Yeah.
But if I were saying that the buyer has the flexibility of it being the right time now or any time in the near future,
I think it's a tough question to answer because I think if I'm just shooting from the hip, I'd say probably in the next 3 months, right? If I'm shooting from the hip, just, oh my gosh, answer right now, next 3 months, that's probably the best time to buy.
What's the logic for that?
But the reason I think that is the case is that I think as rates come down, we will have more competition. And I think that it's likely that home values will stay strong, if not increase at least 2 to 3%. So your buying power will increase a little bit as the rates come down, but your competition will go up. So depending on your particular levers of what matters to you, a lot of first-time home buyers, I think, it'll be good to buy within the next 3 months. If you're doing a step-up buy, you might not have the inventory for the house that you want until the summer or the fall, until more houses hit the market. So I think truly it is, and this is what I love about our job and the consultative approach of, working with clients, is that there is truly no one size fits all answer. So for someone who's looking for like a step up home, which I think has been out of the market, they have to wait till they find a home that they like more than where they live now. A first-time home buyer just needs a house that they like more than an apartment or the house they're renting or living with their
Yeah, it's a lower
family.
bar to exceed.
It's a completely different lower bar for them to say this is better than where I am now. Whereas if you have a house and you have a mortgage on it of 4%, let's say, and rates are sixes, high fives, mid sixes, high sixes, whatever, it's going to be a lot higher threshold for them to want to move. And also you have to find the kind of inventory of those similar clients that are probably going to be moving somewhere else, or they're stepping up as well. So I think if you're a first-time home buyer, the next 3 months will be a really good opportunity before we really see rates start to fully come down and maybe more competition enters the market. But I think if you're a little bit more picky and you're looking for a step-up home, you might just have to wait till there's inventory that you really like.
Yeah, I agree.
Because in order to make the benefit has to outweigh the cost of the current home, maybe the rate that you have. Like there's that, it's got to be the home to make sure you're making that upgrade and making that jump.
I mean, going from the 400 at 4%, your rate's what, like 2,000, or your mortgage is like around that 2,200 a month?
I'd have to pull it. You're saying just for the principal and interest?
Yeah, principal and interest.
It should be close to that. I think it would be a little, at 4%. I just haven't priced out 4% in so long.
But
I'm like,
if they were to do a
so.
step up and put their equity from their sale, let's say it's $150,000 towards their $600,000 home that their mortgage is still $450 at more like 6.5. I mean, that's still a jump of over $1,000 plus a month.
Oh, more. Yeah, more so.
That's
probably
a pretty
15.
big
Yeah, probably
change.
1,500 plus. It's going to jump.
It's just interesting to talk about it out loud. I can't think of a world where inventory is going to drastically change. I think a lot of people predicted the foreclosure market. As somebody who buys in the foreclosure market, we're not seeing it. You're bringing up a good point that the inventory from step-up buyers is kind of the stalemate where it's relying on other step-up buyers. New construction is not able to keep up with the regulations that we have. So I don't see a world where there is prices coming down. That's why I would say for me, I would recommend for most anybody buy now while you have less competition. You can get better terms and better deals. But I hear what you're saying, which is if you don't find a house you don't love, you're not going to make the step up either way.
No. And I think for first-time home buyers, and it's obviously I'm a little biased to that because that's predominantly who I help, probably 60, at this stage, probably 50% now, because it's a good amount of step-up buyers that I've incorporated, but it's probably 50+% is first-time home buyers, and that's always been my passion. I love helping first-time home buyers, and I think for them, truly it is. You're looking at 2 to 3 years of living somewhere versus like, oh, this is where I'm going to raise my children and we're going to be here for 10, 15 years. So there's a lot more inventory out there for first-time home buyers. And it'll just be very curious to see what happens as the market moves. I know that, obviously the federal government or I think it's the California government was passing different laws about zoning and different APNs and like ADUs. Have you guys kept up on any of those changes? Can you touch on that? Because I feel like that's them trying to pull one lever to hopefully help with some affordability. But I don't think everybody's going to start parceling up their properties and selling off their ADUs. Like, what do you guys see with that?
The only downside to that is that the cost of building the ADU is more than what it brings value to the property. And
would you say it's like 60 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar?
Yeah, probably 40 or 50.
Okay.
I had a company out of Visalia talk to me about ADUs. They're flippers themselves, but they have like a part of their business that just builds ADUs for their clients. And it's like $100,000 to $200,000 to build a 1-bed, 1-bath, or a studio is going to be closer to that 100, 150 mark. To build a 2-bed, 1-bath, these are only like 800 square feet on the big end. That's like $200,000. So you think about the market in the Central Valley.
Yeah.
You buy a $400,000 home with a lot big enough to do it. You put on an ADU that you compare that home to another home.
It doesn't.
Nobody's going to pay you $600,000.
No.
Or $650,000 to make a return.
Well, I'm talking more particularly about them. I believe it's passed where they're saying that they're going to allow people to like separate their parcel or their APN and then sell separately an ADU as its own home.
So they're working on it. But again, I think the statement still stands. You look at
it's not cost
look at
effective
a
unless the
800
property
square
already
foot
has
house.
it. Well, yeah, I think, and it's different conversation for like a converted property or one that already has it versus building it brand new. But even then, I don't know a lot of people that are going to take, like if you sell an ADU and take property from your own house, let's say you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you section
Now
off
you have a
two,
5.
yeah, 2 or 3, like I don't know what that's going to, and there's no real, at least in a local level, there's not much of a example set for you to be able to look at. Oh, is this going to be cost effective for me? What happens down the road if I want to sell my main home and I've already parceled out the back of my house with this ADU? What is this worth now that we have a built-in like neighbor in the backyard? Like,
Well, and that's what I was going to say is, of the people willing to have a neighbor in such close proximity, how many are going to say it's cost effective to sell it and make, 100 or 200,000 right now, versus how many are going to say, I'd rather not take the risk. I'll rent it out and make my mortgage half the price.
yeah.
I still think the same thing that you're seeing with the step up buyers. They're going to say, I'd rather hold on to the real estate than sell it.
And I think the same thing. I feel like I saw that and I was like, well, I'm glad that hopefully they're loosening up some restrictions so people could do, that if they'd like. But I don't think that that's going to solve our housing issues.
No.
I don't think them trying to allow people to parcel up land or, build an ADU and then sell it as an individual property. I'm like, it seems cool. I just don't know what it's actually going to do.
Well, and if you think of the everyday homeowner, your typical everyday homeowner is probably most likely not going to go through a process like that.
No, they're not.
To get it done.
Yeah, I agree
Right?
with you.
So it's going to be indifferent.
It's a niche product.
Exactly.
It's a niche product for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing I don't see it on social media. I hear it from the older generations. It's not the ones that say, oh, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, figure it out. I bought a house, X, Y, and Z. It's the opposite side of the generation that says, man, home prices are going to crash because nobody can afford these homes anymore. You see people getting qualified all the time. Are you seeing an issue with people qualifying for homes to get into the first-time home buyer market here in town?
I think it depends on what your expectations are, right? If you think that a single income earner that has, let's say, student loans, a $300 a month car payment, and a couple of credit cards is going to be able to qualify for a home, like a nice home.
What's a nice home?
I would say like for a first-time home buyer, when I first started in the industry I got licensed in 2016, really started working in 2017. Most first-time home buyer homes, not fully remodeled, turnkey, like livable.
$350?
No, when I first started, 180 to 200,000.
Whoa.
Yeah, 180 to 200,000 was like a decent price for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in a lot of areas of Fresno. Obviously, the nicer homes, the fully remodeled ones, the brand new ones, but even a lot of new homes are being built in the 250 to 300 range. As it's shifted up, I think a decent neighborhood, right, with a decent square footage, not needing a lot of work, I would say what I'm seeing for a lot of my clients is around 320 to 400. That's pretty consistent. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
So with rates being where they are and a single income earner, if you're very early in your career, like they say 22, 23, 24, freshly out of college, maybe you're making, depending on your field, maybe you're making $22 to $25 an hour. It's $50,000 a year before taxes, which works out to be just about, let's say, $4,000 a month, in terms of what an underwriter is going to look at. They're going to say, okay, you have $4,000 a month. Now let's budget you. They normally don't want you to spend more than 40 to 43% of that on your mortgage, which you're looking at about $1,700. That's tough. That's
What price
really
point is
tough.
that?
I mean, you're going to be looking, depending on the down payment and other factors.
Assuming a minimal down
you're
payment.
way under 350, way under 320. You're looking at something closer to about 200 to 220,000, right? So for where home values were 6 years ago, not a problem. The problem is that income has not even come close to keeping up with the values of homes, and then also you have the fact that they're raising interest rates to try to fight inflation and home valuations increasing at a ridiculous pace, like we saw in 2020 and 21, where home values were going up 15 to 18% per year. That is completely unsustainable. So in a sense, the government has done a decent job at stopping kind of the monster that they created, right? Because they lowered rates so low, home values were going up so fast. They had to stop it, which also made it very unaffordable for everybody, including first-time home buyers. But if you have a couple that are not even far along in their career, and it could be family members, it could be either dating, married, engaged, whatever. If you're combining incomes and you're both making $22 to $25 an hour, well, now you can qualify for something in the $300,000 range or $400,000 range. So I'm not seeing a lot of people that have entry-level jobs or are fresh out of college that are necessarily qualifying, but I have a lot of teachers or educators that are, not the highest paid, not the lowest paid. They have pretty good income, usually, starting wages around mid 50s to, mid 60s. And they can qualify on their own depending on what other debts that they might have, right? Car payments, student loans, credit cards, etc. So I just pre-qualified a teacher that's been teaching for 5 years the other day. And she's, I think, just turned 30, 29, 30. And she's qualified for end of the $400,000 range by herself without any other cosigner.
And that's a great house.
It's a great
Fresno.
home.
Yeah.
It is. It
You're
is
in
a great
safe
home.
area, 1,500 square feet,
Yeah.
3 bed, 2 bath.
Yeah, it's truly, it truly, it's situation by situation, but I'd say people who are buying homes are fully qualified. They're not using the kind of loan products that added into all of the issues in the 07, 08 market and the crash. There's not the kind of blatant fraud and misrepresentation of clients' ability to repay, right? There's not doing stated income loans. They're not doing as many interest only or balloon payments or adjustable rate mortgages. Like, I don't think I've done a single adjustable rate mortgage in all of my years. I've had clients look into it. No one's ever done it. So there's not this pressure for people to have to sell. And I think that's the other thing is because rates were so low, you have a gigantic portion of inventory and clientele that is not going to be incentivized to sell. Even if home values do come down by 10%, a lot of that will have to be fueled by extra inventory because the buyers aren't going away. The buyers are coming back. So there would have to be so much inventory to be able to outweigh that. It's just hard for me to imagine a world where values drop significantly. I think we've seen that adjustment already. And I tell clients all the time, look at Boise, look at Arizona, look at Texas, look at Colorado, look at Utah, look at Vegas. From their highs of COVID, a lot of them dropped 30 to 50% of their highs. Fresno did not do that. A lot of California
did not
really
dropped at all. Maybe a few percent, but we recovered quickly.
Year over year. Yeah. So month by month, we may have dropped. But when you look year over year, I don't believe that Fresno has really dropped. I think at the lowest, I think year over year from 22 to 23, I think that we went up maybe 1.5% to 2%. So it wasn't a huge gain, but it didn't drop the 5,
That's
10.
a healthy reaction.
Yeah.
It was needed.
It was needed.
I have a question. You made me think of it with your adjustable rate mortgage statement. Do you remember the 3-2-1 buy down that everybody pushed? I wonder if that was the right call.
I think it was.
Like, holy shit.
I didn't have a lot of clients that wanted to take it, but the clients that I did, and obviously
explain the 3-2-1 buy down one more time.
Yeah, so I would just call it a temporary buy down. That's more simple because there's 1 year buy down, and then the next year it's not. There's 2 year, 2, 3. There's all these different variations. Essentially, what a temporary buy down does is it's taking either funds that the lender wants to give to you, as a lender credit, funds that maybe the seller wants to give to you. Sometimes even you could take your own assets, which it would be kind of odd to do this, but it's normally taking credits from a seller or from a lender. And for those that don't know, there are only particular categories that interested parties can help contribute to when you're purchasing a home. So if you're buying a house, they cannot help you with the down payment, right? It would be not necessarily in your best interest if Scott and I would be like, hey, we'll both give you $1,000, go ahead and buy that house. They don't want that to be a part of the process. So when you have a credit from maybe an agent or a seller or a lender, sometimes you couldn't use it on all of your applicable fees. And so something that was really cool, whether or not you wanted to do it just for the sake of it or just to use fees, I think that's a lot of it. There were a lot of credits and people are trying to, how can we use this? It's essentially an escrow account, right? So besides your taxes and insurance that most people have escrowed, where a portion of their monthly payment goes into basically an automatic bill pay account, and then that account is managed for you, and it pays your property taxes for you twice a year. It pays your homeowner's insurance for you once a year on the anniversary of when you bought your home. That's an escrow account that a lot of people are familiar with. A temporary buy down account is also an escrow account. And sometimes it's set up to be working for only 12 months, where it basically is money set aside to pay the difference between whatever rate you actually have on your mortgage, which let's say it was 7.5%. Well, for the first year, you are effectively out of your pocket going to be paying a payment based off of, let's say, a 6.5%. And that difference between the 7.5 and the 6.5, let's say it's $240, $250, that's set aside in an escrow account. So if it's a 1 year buy down, well, $250 a month times 12 months, $3,000, right? Pretty simple math. So $3,000 in the escrow account. Well, then effectively you have a lower payment for a year. It's not actually an adjustable rate mortgage because it is a 7.5%. You just have an account
You
with
aren't
money.
paying it.
Yeah, you basically have set aside money that is going to be helping you pay that difference. But it got kind of not complicated, but it had a whole host of options because you could do a 2 year buy down where the first year was 2% lower. So you go from 7.5 to 5.5. And then the next year it would go to 6.5. And then the third year it goes to 7.5. And the biggest benefit of that versus just taking, let's say, $3,000 and buying down your interest rate from 7.5 to 7.25 or 7.125 is that if you refinance before that whole period is done, you get to take whatever is left in that escrow account and apply it to the next loan. So you could pay for some of the costs of the refinance. You could just pay down the loan balance. You could do a whole host of things versus I had other clients that are like, well, I'm just going to buy down my rate right now as much as I can. And I had a client who for them, it made sense. He was like, no, I'm going to do it. He ended up doing like a $15,000 permanent buy down in the fall. And I was like, I don't feel good about this. But this is your transaction. So I'm going to tell you what I see moving forward. And he's like, look, I believe everything that you're telling me. He goes, look, I'm helping my brother figure out how to buy this house, right? Because his brother had been living with him and was buying it from him. And he goes, look, I'm trying to make it as easy for him and his fiance. They're probably not going to do this again. They're probably not even going to do a refinance. Like I'm helping him get into homeownership. So he's like, I'm just going to help with a big seller credit to help him buy down his rate to where they can feel comfortable now. And maybe they end up refinancing down the road. But that was probably one of the biggest permanent buy downs I've had ever. I was trying to encourage him to do a temporary buy down because I felt like it was a better way to kind of hedge your risk because it's very likely I felt like rates were going to come down. And so I think a lot of people that bet on that and did the 3-2-1s or the 2-1s or 1-0s, whatever, I think they're going to be sitting really pretty because they're going to have thousands. Yeah, they have a lower payment right now, and they have thousands of dollars.
They're never going to get to the higher payment.
No, they're never going to get to the higher payment. They're going to be able to take whatever's in that account and roll it over to the refinance. Whereas if you negotiate up front for a permanent buy down with the lender, they just keep the money. So you could pay them thousands of dollars, and if you end up refinancing before the monthly savings covers what you paid up front, the bank won.
Well, you could even do it right now. I feel like, we have a client in escrow right now that we were talking about what their max credit is. And it seems like maybe they're going to get a bigger credit than they can really use. Maybe it's like, hey, we know rates are coming down, but let's put this towards a temporary buy down because for certain you're refinancing in a year.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest ways to use extra credits. And that's what, when I saw it happen, I've only gotten to do one. I've pitched it and presented it to a lot of clients. I did it on one transaction. And when I saw how it all penciled out and I'm a very visual person, so I understood the concept of it. And I could explain it. But when I saw it all, I was like, oh my gosh, this is genius. Because especially when you have extra funds, it is a perfect way to utilize a large seller credit. It is a perfect way.
Yeah. Wow. So wrapping up the podcast because we're getting late on time here.
I feel like we've been talking for like 15 minutes.
I know. That's how it always goes. What is the takeaway, kind of a round table for 2024? What's the feeling as of January 4th, 2024 for how 24 is going to look?
I feel like it's going to be a strong year overall. I feel like the people who have waited on the sidelines, who have been crying and chiming and screaming for price drops or a crash and throwing all that stuff out, they're going to continue to sit on the sidelines and sit and cry and wait while everybody else takes the opportunities that I think this year will come with. I think we will I don't foresee a lot of losers this year for people who are either getting into home ownership or maybe making the jump to their next home out of their starter home. I don't foresee a lot of losers this year. I foresee a lot of winners in a strong year pushing through. And I think I'm excited for this year. We predict and we talk, through this a lot, and we have a lot of reasoning and education behind it. But I think it's always exciting to see, us talking about this now and seeing how this year plays out. But I'm excited not only for ourselves individually, but I'm excited for our clients. I'm excited for the sellers we're going to help on the investment side. I think overall, there's going to be a lot of winners this year.
Yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts are. I agree with you a lot there. I think that's a great take.
I'm going to try to be specific, but I know in December, we're going to look back at this episode and hear what we said.
Mm-hmm.
I think rates are going to drop. I'm going to estimate that they're going to end somewhere between 5 and 6%, and they are going to be stabilized. And I believe that there will be some ping-ponging of some sort. I don't know if rates will ever go up, but I think the Fed will pause rate drops periodically. I think overall home values are going to go up 5 to 7%
year over year.
Year over year. I believe that,
and that's on a local level. We're not
Fresno,
trying to plan national, just Fresno.
We're talking our specific market. And I think inventory will be more strained. I think we'll have less homes for sale. Correction. I believe that inventory will get bought up quicker than it hits the market. So I think inventory is going to go down because buyers are buying more than they have.
So you say more transactions, but in a way almost less sitting inventory.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad guess.
And I think we are going to see the beginning of the refinance boom somewhere in the ballpark of June or as late as August.
Yeah, I think that's when it'll get busy.
Those are my kind of metric predictions on what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think those are good estimates from both of you guys. I feel very similarly, I think, to both of you. I think I've kind of shared a little bit earlier in the podcast what my projections were, but to reiterate, in Fresno, I would say I think I'm going to be a little bit more conservative with some of the appreciation, because I do think, and I talked to another coworker about this, and it is a good point. And he said, I was like, do you feel like we're in a recession? What do you think is really going on? And shout out to Cameron, my buddy from Alameda. He was like, looking over credit applications and people's finances, people are not all doing as well as they might present themselves to be. And I think that's true. So I think that while there will be a lot of people that want to buy, I think some people are really hurting over the last few years. I mean, inflation has affected a lot of people's bottom lines and a lot of people's budgets and financing. So while I do think that there are a lot more clients that are going to be qualifying, I think that there will be some people who just say, screw it, I want to sell my house and clear out all my debt. Like, I want to pay off my car and credit cards and this, or maybe they just do a refinance to do some of that. But I think that there's going to be a lot more people that qualify on paper. In terms of how many of them actually do choose to buy, it'll be curious to see, but I'd say 3 to 5% appreciation year over year. I think your rate target is accurate. I thought we were going to get this summer into the low 6s. I now would say if they do the rate cuts as they've been projected, I think this summer or fall we'll probably see mid 5s with a lot of products. So we're very close to 6% or high 5s with FHA without paying points. If you pay points, of course, you could get it down below there. But I think the par rate will probably be below 6 for most loan products by the middle to end of the year.
I think we're all on the same page. David, last question. Mm-hmm. What's one piece of advice for the listeners who just listened to this podcast coming into 2024 from a loan officer?
I think it depends. I feel like a lot of your guys' listeners, I mean, it's some people who are in the industry. We think it's more people in the industry or more people that are just like interested in real estate?
More in the industry.
I'd say if you're in the industry, I think it would be very smart, especially if you're on the loan side, to sharpen up on any and all tools. I think for me last year, I made about a year and a half ago, is like the end of 2022, I really worked to educate myself on HELOCs.
Okay.
So I think that if you're in lending, become very well educated with different kind of products, to where if you have a client that doesn't necessarily want to sell, but they want to move up or do something, I think that it's a great tool that you could help them, utilize some of their equity. There also might just be some straight up refinances where people are refinancing HELOCs. But I think asking, learning about HELOCs and also reaching out to your book of business and people that that maybe got a HELOC, but now they want to refinance and bundle it all into their mortgage because the rates have come down enough where it makes sense. I think that makes sense. And I think on the real estate side, I think continuing to educate yourself and just being able to be a resource to tell people what is likely to happen. You can't, we don't know for sure. We don't have a crystal ball. But I think if you're a realtor, I think being able to explain what has been going on in the market and what is currently happening and moving forward, I have found that that's the best way to help people get off the fences from being afraid. If you can truly educate them on, hey, rather than just saying, oh my gosh, real estate's been so crazy, tell them why it's been crazy. Hey, there's been lack of inventory. Hey, rates got so low that home prices were going up too fast. Like, this had to happen. And when I tell clients that, I'm like, this is painful, but this had to happen. Look at the cost of groceries. Look at gas. Look at everything. Like, everything got so expensive. They had to do something to slow it down, which makes sense. But I think long story short, it's education. Educate yourself more, become a better resource, and I think the rest will really take care of itself.
Dude,
fantastic.
We appreciate you, bro. I don't think we've had anybody on as much as you as a repeat guest. And I think to our listeners and to people who watch, I think that I want that to be a testament of how much we appreciate you, your insight, your opinion. For new listeners who are maybe listening and tuning in for the first time, or for people who may have still not followed you or connected with you on social media, even though they've watched some of your episodes, where can people find you?
The easiest thing, reach out to you guys. But yeah, D Keller & Co. On Instagram. And then besides that, shoot me a message, give me a call, shoot me a text. I love meeting people. I feel like I'm pretty friendly.
You are. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. We will see you guys next week on the second episode of 2024.
Boom.